When most people go on the run, they try to keep a low profile. Catalina de Erauso did the exact opposite. Duels, gambling, romance scams, and military campaigns across 2 continents. But the craziest part isn't the rap sheet, it's the memoir Erauso left behind, which blurred real history with some interesting lore in the most spectacular way. Catalina was born in San Sebastian in northern Spain's Basque country. Her memoir says it was the year 1855. Around 4 years old, she was placed into a convent where her aunt was the mother superior, and this was not a weekend sleepover. Catalina was raised there and expected to take vows and live religious life as a nun. By her mid-teens, however, she had had enough. According to the memoir, another nun had quite a bit during an argument. Catalina was enraged, so she waited until the community was distracted at prayer, slipped into her aunt's room, grabbed keys, coins, scissors, and a needle and thread, and then just walked straight out the front door. Thanks for the childhood trauma, I'll be taking the sewing kit, bitches. Catalina then hid for several days in the forest behind the convent and started cutting up her clothes. A blue skirt became trousers. Another layer became a shirt and leggings. She chopped off all her hair, dumped the rest of the nun's habit into the dirt, and stepped onto the road, dressed as a boy. Hello world, watch the freak out. But of course, Catalina was only 15, broke, and had zero experience with the outside world. To avoid getting caught and dragged back to the nunnery, Catalina began rotating through fake boys' names like Dirty Underwear, taking jobs as a personal assistant wherever she could find work. And this was perfect for her, because it gave her an inside look at how her bosses, the rich and elite men of society, walked, talked, and made their way through the world. After bouncing around for a bit, Catalina landed a job for the king's secretary, Juan de Iriaquez, and this is where the story gets ridiculous. One day, her father showed up to talk to Iriaquez, looking for his missing daughter. Catalina stood right next to him and spoke with him directly. He had zero clue. Either the disguise was incredible, or he was a bottom-tier dad. A while later, Catalina returned to San Sebastian dressed as a fashionable young gentleman and walked straight into her old convent to attend Mass. Her own mother looked directly at her and didn't suspect a thing. Imagine risking your entire identity for the 17th century equivalent of checking if your ex noticed your glow up. But by this point, Catalina was not simply wearing different clothing. She had been taking notes while working those menial jobs, practicing her walk, her talk, her mannerisms, even how to carry a weapon, to look like a high-class society man with power and prestige. And it worked. Now, historically speaking, scholars still debate how to describe Catalina's identity. Was Catalina a woman using male clothes to access basic human freedoms? Or were they one of history's early trans or non-binary figures? Or both? Because around 1603, Erauso boarded a galleon bound for the Spanish Americas as a cabin boy named Antonio. And because history loves a bad sitcom trope, the ship's captain was also their relative. Did he recognize Erauso? Of course not. Apparently, unless you were wearing official convent merch, no one in this family could identify you. Go figure. After arriving in the Americas, Erauso borrowed 500 pesos from their employer, ditched the ship, and headed toward Peru. They put all that upper-class know-how to work managing shops, handling goods, and even keeping financial accounts. Everything was surprisingly chill. Erauso had a steady job and solid pay, until a guy at the theater blocked their view and threatened to slash Erauso's face. Big mistake. Huge. Erauso tracked the guy down the next day, still furious, and launched a confrontation that ended with multiple people injured and Antonio in jail. And this became the standard operating procedure for the rest of their life. Disrespect them at a card table? Sword. Threaten them in the street? Sword. Complicate their romantic life? Believe it or not, also sword. Whenever the law caught up with them, Erauso pulled off a genius trick. They ran into the nearest Catholic church and claimed sanctuary. Under Spanish law, secular police could not drag someone out of a sacred space. Erauso treated churches like 17th century safe houses with unlimited respawns. Talk about putting that convent education to good use. And this is when I started thinking, Surely the cops just arrested Eraso when they came back out of the church, right? But no, because this dude was too clever and apparently somehow too likable for that. After the theater brawl, the local magistrate actually whispered to Eraso in Basque so the Spanish guards wouldn't understand, telling them to break free as they passed the main church. So they did, and Eraso claimed sanctuary as soon as they got into the church. Their boss then tried to get the charges dropped, but was unsuccessful. So they gave Eraso clothes, money, and a recommendation letter before sending them off to Lima. But Eraso was still a hot freaking mess and ended up in another romantic and legal crap show, so they took the cleanest exit available, enlisting in the Spanish military as a conquistador bound for Chile. But this was not a glamorous little adventure, where Eraso defeated bad guys and earned a shiny medal. And Eraso's fun rebel story really takes a dark turn from this point forward. Spain was fighting the indigenous Mapuche people in the brutal Arauco War. It is deeply ironic that after escaping a system that restricted their own life, Eraso joined an imperial army that inflicted horror on others. The oppressed became the oppressor. While stationed in Concepcion, an officer arrived to inspect the new recruits. His name was Miguel de Erauso, Antonio's biological older brother, who had left Spain years earlier, because of course, what's an unhinged historical story without some peak telenovela drama? Now, Miguel had heard that this new recruit came from San Sebastian, and apparently he embraced Eraso like a hometown bestie. He started asking about his family, including his little sister Catalina, assuming she was still safely locked away in a Spanish convent. Meanwhile, Antonio is standing there like, oh, Catalina, the nun? Huge fan, wonder what she's up to these days. For nearly 3 years, the siblings ate, slept, and served together without Miguel ever realizing the truth. Eventually, they had a falling out over a local woman, because if there was one thing Eraso never mastered, it was boundaries, and the argument got so physical that they were reassigned to a dangerous frontier post. There, Eraso climbed the military ranks, eventually earning the title of Alferez, aka Ensign, though history remembers them as the Lieutenant Nun. But Eraso's own memoir clearly describes horrific military violence, destroying crops, and executing a surrendered Mapuche leader. They were so notoriously aggressive that the governor blocked further promotions. Think about that. Antonio was officially flagged for being too violent for the Spanish colonial army. That is a level of unhinged I did not know could be unlocked. With their military career stalled, Antonio went off the deep end. After a gambling match spiraled into a fatal duel, Antonio hid inside a Franciscan convent for 6 months while the governor's guards surrounded the building. One dark night, Antonio slipped out to act as a friend's second in a midnight duel. Visibility was 0. It was pure chaos. Antonio struck the opponent down, heard them groan, and realized too late that they had just yeeted their own biological brother into the afterlife. Miguel died on the cobblestones, never knowing the soldier standing over him was actually his missing sister, Catalina. Pretty tragic. After this event in Chile, Eraso's life became a full montage of questionable choices across Argentina, Bolivia, and Peru. The pattern was identical. Gamble, get into a fight, win a sword duel, run to a church. Along the way, Eraso reportedly promised marriage to multiple women, accepted their family gifts, and then ghosted before the wedding. A classic 17th century romance scam. Watch out, Tinder swindler, you are not the OG. The exact timeline is a nightmare, and some stories have little evidence to try and piece it together. But eventually, in Huamanga, modern-day Ayacucho, Peru, the streak ended. Armed officers surrounded Eraso after a brawl. There was no church nearby and no escape route. Out of luck, Chuck. Facing execution, Eraso begged for an audience with the local bishop, 𝐻𝐿𝐷 de Carvajal, for a final confession. And inside that room, Eraso dropped the ultimate truth bomb. Sorry, Your Holiness, but I'm actually a woman. Eraso confessed everything: the convent escape, the disguise, the high seas voyage, the military career, and the duels. But it wasn't just a spiritual confession. It was a masterclass in legal strategy. Erauso claimed they had never taken their final convent vows and had remained a virgin. So the bishop ordered 2 midwives to perform an examination, and they officially reported that, yup, this wild-ass soldier was biologically female and as intact as a delicate flower. This gave the Catholic Church a massive PR opportunity. Erauso was no longer a violent fugitive. They reframed Catalina as a miraculous Catholic heroine who preserved her purity while fighting for the Spanish crown. The bishop placed Erauso in a convent for protection, while messengers verified the story with Spain. When records confirmed Erauso had never taken final vows, they walked out of the convent doors. Again. At this point, the church really needed to stop giving this person doors. Jeez. Erauso returned to Spain in 1624 as an absolute global celebrity. Crowds lined the streets just to see them. Pamphlets started circulating about the sensational nun ensign, and there was even a stage play happening. But being famous is expensive, so Erauso petitioned King Philip IV for a military pension for all of their quote-unquote heroic deeds, and the king granted a lifetime pension of 800 escudos a year, roughly $27,000 in today's money. Even in the middle of a once-in-a-century gender scandal, the government will still negotiate your benefits package. Next, Erauso traveled to Rome to meet Pope Urban VIII. According to the memoir, the Pope granted Erauso official, legal permission to wear men's clothing for the rest of their life, with only one condition: live honestly and stop stabbing people. Basically, the pants are fine, but the non-stop dueling is becoming a concern. Because naturally, right before this papal meeting, Erauso reportedly got into another sword fight in Genoa. Personal growth is not linear. The meeting made them even more famous. Nobles, bishops, and cardinals invited Erauso into elite circles. Rome reportedly recognized them as an honorary citizen. Eventually, Erauso returned to the Americas and settled in Mexico under the name Antonio de Erauso. And how did history's most violent, fugitive duel master finish out their days? They ran a mule transport business, carrying passengers and cargo around Veracruz, Mexico. After convent, shipwrecks, battlefields, prisons, royal courts, and papal audiences, Antonio retired into supply chain logistics. That might be the biggest plot twist of all. The beast was finally tamed. Antonio died around 1650, around the age of 75, leaving behind a legacy that blurs history, memoir, and folklore into one glorious mess. So, what do you think? Did the dramatic brother duel really happen, or was Erauso just playing it up for memoir sales? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if Catalina escaping to a convent to become a sword-fighting lieutenant was wild, check out our episode on Carlotta, the Empress of Mexico whose royal career ended in a shocking breakdown inside the Vatican. I'll link it in the show notes. Until next time, keep your receipts, cause a little chaos, and please, for the love of God, avoid midnight duels in the dark.